Hello, what's up? Welcome. In this video, I'm going to be checking out the time-lapse of a design that I did. The idea that I had at the beginning of the design was just to develop some sort of an interesting knife. And I was thinking probably some sort of a survival knife. Early on, I hadn't decided exactly on the functionality or the type of knife specifically that I was going to build. But I did know that I wanted to have this interesting circular design element. I was inspired by the karambit, which is a combat knife that has a hole in the pinky that can be used to keep the knife in hand. So in combat situations, you don't drop it if you let go of it. But it's also a really cool element, and so I decided to put one up at the front. I was thinking about using that hole for some sort of a switchblade element, so that it would be an out the front spring knife. But I decided when I was creating the blade shape that I didn't want to be restricted to some sort of a blade that could fit inside of the handle, especially if I was going to do some sort of a survival knife. I was inspired as I continued to develop the design and continued to come up with the shape by the Bowie knife. I love American frontiersmen, and so I brought in some elements of that, and then also another big inspiration, as you'll see later on, was the Kukri, which is another survival knife used in the West. And I'll talk more about that later when the blade shape comes up. So as you see here, I just started by laying stuff out. At this point, I'm just, playing around inside of Plasticity, throwing shapes at this thing and seeing what sticks.
So you're telling me that you don't actually go into the design with everything in your head?
No, actually, a lot of this stuff you're figuring it out along the way and just using your knowledge of the tools to create things and then see what works.
Wow, that's really crazy.
Yeah, I like to do a lot of research beforehand, or sometimes in the middle of a design, to figure out what kind of shapes make sense and if I've got functionalities that I need to explore. But a lot of the stuff is sort of just getting in the zone, getting in the flow state, trying to really focus on creating something, and then letting the design flow from, trial and error. It's a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. I'm into it.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, so
Just figuring out this shape, I got inspired to do some sort of a lever. I wasn't exactly sure what it would be for, but I figured I'd be able to incorporate the lever with the circular element that I started out with, and then that lever sort of can convey a more functional side of this knife, where the blade will have an obvious combat shape, and I'm gonna make it look pretty mean, but I also want to show that it's a tool. Maybe it's a Wild West future where everyone's got to be self-reliant, and instead of carrying their phones everywhere with them like we do today, they have this utility knife that they can use for self-defense or to, do bushcraft. So here I'm just going around and adding elements, cleaning up stuff, messing around with adding bevels to things just to jog my mind. And then I come up with an idea to start splitting things up using different materials. And I think that's a super effective technique, especially inside of Plasticity, where you can drop lines to create separations anywhere. And on the handle, it makes sense. There's going to be a rubber part, probably some hard part. But yeah, whenever you can start to break up the design, especially inside of these CAD softwares where the separations are easy to make and not as obvious, I think it's a super useful way to progress the design along and to start thinking about different elements and the different functional pieces, as well as just graphically splitting up your shapes. Probably spending a bit too much time here on this pommel. This was kind of just me throwing techniques or tools at the problem and not going in with a whole lot of guidance, but knowing that the pommel wasn't super interesting or exciting to me.
So, like, sometimes you don't know what you're doing and you just do stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think even both new and experienced artists alike, sometimes, if you don't have an idea, but you want to keep working, you want to try and stay in that flow state, you can just do things and hope that they come out good. And then even if they don't, once you've got something down, you can go back in and keep finessing it till it's good.
Like you make something and then you come back to it. Oh, word. That's cool.
So as I'm working on the blade here, what you'll see is I'm using a lot of the same techniques that I practiced and basically learned in my last video, where I was modeling the Riat Exo knife. And it actually brings up a pretty interesting or valuable point, which is that if you're having trouble in your design process, or if you're trying to get into designing something for the first time, my advice would be to go in and practice modeling something like what you want to design. For example, if you're trying to design a sci-fi gun, go take images of a real gun, a Glock, whatever, and practice modeling that. And in the experience of actually modeling it, you're going to gain a lot of insight into the workings of the gun. It's worth researching some stuff like that. And then also just understanding the shapes and how to make them, and how they fit together and stuff like that. And by practicing to model the real thing, you'll develop a skill set and an understanding that will come in handy, and it will offload a lot of the mental energy of how might this gun work, how will the shapes fit together. And so you can focus on the design side of things and making interesting shapes, and then also free up some mental energy to come up with, perhaps some interesting functionality. And that worked really well in this design for me because I just finished modeling in Plasticity another knife. And so I was able to bring a lot of that experience of how to build the knife, what elements of a knife are interesting.
So like practice making similar things and then use that experience later to create your own design. Neat.
Yeah, and it's not like that means that you can't use reference at any point, but it will enable you to be free and not tied down to the reference if you study first and then come back to it. Right here, I'm actually referencing a kukri, which is a utility knife that's also used in warfare. And I showed the tomahawk there as well because the kukri has this forward, the blade is far forward from the hand, which enables it to be a really front-heavy knife and a really good chopping knife. And it's actually a very similar knife in terms of its use to the Bowie knife. And so at this point, I figured maybe I could use this lever to make the blade like a multi-position semi-fixed blade that would enable two positions where one, the blade would be further into the knife and have more of the same profile as a Bowie knife, and just be kind of a big, beefy utility knife. And then if you press the switch, either using the lever or I ultimately put a trigger inside the finger hole, you could change the shape of the knife and extend the blade further out and further forward to give it that forward bowed kukri shape, which would enable it to be excellent for chopping and bigger for certain fighting elements. So here I'm just playing with the design a little bit, starting to test out this functionality for the idea that I had. And so I started to create this trigger shape and to put this trigger element in. And I was trying to, basically solve the problem of how is this blade going to go inside of the finger hole and sit inside the knife where it does so that it fits, but also so that it doesn't cut the user. And I had a great idea. When I was researching the kukri, I discovered a myth. Basically, it's a popular myth about kukri that once a Gurkha, which is a Nepalese warrior, draws his kukri, it must draw blood. And I learned about it because there's a notch on the base, on the end of the blade where the sharpening choil might go. And some people said that notch might be to cut oneself, because if you draw the kukri and you don't kill an enemy or draw blood in that sense, I guess the myth says that you're supposed to then cut yourself so that the blade draws blood before it is sheathed again. And this myth was actually an awesome source of inspiration because it allowed my knife to have historical roots and connections to its inspiration, the kukri. And it solved the problem of how is the blade going to go back into the finger guard without cutting the user. And basically the way I solved it is it does cut you. If you pull the trigger, the blade will fire forward, and then that extra piece of the blade that crosses through the circle will cut your finger and draw that blood. And so it's basically like a sci-fi version of a kukri with a built-in element following that myth. I thought this was a really cool idea, and it's an argument for why it's awesome and why it's good to study and research the actual historical ideas relating to your design, because there's tons of inspiration there, and because they're historical, you're not biting some other artist, you're using inspiration from history. And I was really excited about this idea, and it came out pretty cool. I'll actually put the animation here and you can see the functionality for the design. So basically you pull the lever, and that enables the blade to retract back into the handle, and then when you pull the trigger, it fires out, and that piece of the blade that sticks out past the trigger will then cut your finger as it's going out. So you would be able to use the knife in the smaller Bowie mode, basically, as your survival knife. But then if you're going to go into combat, the knife imparts a level of seriousness to this combat. And so if you're going to fight, you better be ready to kill, you better be ready to draw blood, because you're going to pay a price when you activate the extended blade kukri mode, in the sense that it'll cut your finger. And yeah, it was pretty cool. I was really stoked with that piece of the design and that idea because of its relationship to history, and I love anytime your designs can pay homage to a piece of history or another artist's work. And so in this sense, it reminds us of that myth or that saying that a kukri must draw blood, and then adds this sci-fi element to it as well.
Yeah, man, that's really cool. Like, that's a crazy idea. It's got this functionality and this cultural element. It really creates a lot of story in a world.
Yeah, I mean, this is a design that I got lucky with. A lot of times, you'll be trying to come up with something and all you can do is create a cool looking design, but I like to think deeply, and in this case, I got lucky, and the design had a cool overlap and cool inspiration that came from history. And yeah, I'm pretty proud of that little element. I went as far as to animate it to make sure that the concept was there, because I thought it was pretty brilliant.
If I do say so myself, if I say so myself, yeah, it's a pretty good idea.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. Thanks, man.
All right, so here I'm just going in and adding some of these screw elements, the classic sci-fi detailing, trying to put a good amount to add some stuff, but not too many. And I was trying to come up with an extra piece for the pommel, mostly just creating a graphical element so that it was separate from the rest of the back of the handle, and I could split it up in the render. I'm starting to think about the color breakup. As you can see, I've put the red on different elements. And yeah, I think that pretty much covers most of the design. I can let it play out so you can see the rest of the work. And let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah,
Yeah, I got questions. I got tons of questions.
All right, well, put them in the comments and hit the like button.
Hit the like button? You want me to? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so hit the like button. Definitely subscribe.
subscribe to my channel. I'll try to put out more content for you. And leave any comments if you have any feedback. I'm trying to improve. I'm trying to keep
things fun. Keeping it fun is an important part of these videos. I want to keep them engaging so that people can see the design and learn, hopefully. So, put any comments you have on the video, and let me know if you want to see more voices.
Maybe less voices.
Maybe you want a changing voice. I don't know. But yeah, subscribe, like.
More importantly than all, comment. I do care what you think. And see you in the next one.